Hello and welcome to another session on appreciating poetry. We shall start with the next poem, La Belle Dame Sans Merci by John Keats. I'm not going to give a detailed biography of John Keats because we have already done that when we did Ode to Autumn in the last semester. You know that Keats belongs to the second generation of Romantic poets, and you also know that he was a sensuous poet, and he was in fact the youngest poet. He was greatly inspired in Ode to Autumn. Chatterton's death was one major feature that influenced him to write that beautiful poem. La Belle Dame Sans Merci also has some, the scholars say that it has some autobiographical traits, but again it's just sparks of it, very few streaks of it. Apart from that, it was just a ballad which perhaps he just casually wrote, but the scholars find streaks of his own love, failure in it. Now, considering the poem's context in Keats's life, it's possible that the poet's allegorically inflicted night, his story, speaks of the frustrations and fears of his own relationship. I did tell you about Keats's love for Fanny Brown. Though the love was reciprocated, the couple faced difficult obstacles. First, Fanny Brown's family was of a higher social class, and secondly, Keats's health was failing. Keats's proposal to Fanny Brown were initially rejected because of his financial situations. Fanny Brown and her family accepted when it became clear that Keats was dying of tuberculosis, and when they knew very well that his winter in Italy would be his last. So that's also one very sad thing about Keats's life and his love for Fanny Brown. Some scholars believe that Fanny Brown and Keats never consummated their love. The powerful emotions expressed in their letters read much like the speaker's passion for the lady. Now, when we start the poem, you will understand the knight who fell or who was passionate about the lady, but you will find this sort of passion, this similar passion in their love letters as well. Now, let's come back to the poem. The poem La Belle Dame Sans Merci, the translation, this is a French term, and the translation would be the beautiful lady without pity. Okay? La Belle Dame Sans Merci. Now this, as I told you, is a ballad in the narrative form, and there is music in the ballad. Ballad originates from the French term ballade, which means dance songs. Now, let's just look into this ballad form, and then we'll move into we will get on with the poem. Now, this Judas is a 13th century work which is considered a ballad in English ballads, but if you look at it again, the English ballads actually date from English ballads date from the 15th century. Ballad actually evolved from short, alliterative lays of the Anglo-Saxon period. Ballad is a story in verse. A ballad is a story in a poem, okay, a narrative poem. The story has a single incident and it is dramatically treated. It is not a continuous narrative. The statements in the poem do not express the author's emotions directly. Oral traditions have contributed to the rise of genuine ballads. It was earlier believed that ballads were the result of communal authorship. There could have been many people involved in it. But this theory is, however, replaced by the idea that ballad has a single authorship. Initially, but later, collaborative activity may have contributed to it. Imitation of ballad, both in form and style, results in literary ballads. Now, as an example, I could give you Samuel Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And another example, classic example, would be this poem, La Belle Dame sans Merci. So now that you have understood what a ballad is, let's get on with the poem. As I told you, it's orally handed down from one generation to the other, and this, when it is in the hands of a poet, it becomes a literary ballad, okay? And so Keats has used the style of a ballad and also story that perhaps narrates something that the author wants to tell us, but not directly, very, very indirectly. So ballads became very popular in Britain and Ireland from the 14th century. It is this poem, La Belle Dame sans Merci, is divided into 12 stanzas, and each stanza has 4 lines or quatrains, what we call it as quatrains. Each line has a rhythm. Now I'll just tell you of the meter also, which you have already studied in the first semester. The meter that is used here is iambic tetrameter. In sonnet 18, the meter used was iambic pentameter, and here it is iambic tetrameter. You know what iambs are, I don't have to tell you. One unstressed followed by a stressed syllable. You will get this sound, okay? And what is tetrameter? Tetrameter tells you how many iambs you will find per line, just like in pentameter. In pentameter, how many pairs will you find? 5 pairs, right? 5 iambs. Here you will find 4. Tetra means 4. So iambic tetrameter means 4 iambs, and iambic pentameter contains 5 iambs, right? So here the meter that is used here is iambic tetrameter. Okay. If you look at the first line itself, you will find that, oh, what can ail thee, knight at arms? So, oh, what is a one iamb? You have an unstressed, oh, what, unstressed followed by the stressed syllable, and then again an unstressed followed by stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. So totally you will find 4 iambs. Okay. But again, in that 4th line, when you come to the 4th line, you will find that it is relatively shorter. Keats has used it for an effect. Okay. You will not find tetrameter there. You will find it that it is relatively shorter. The 4th line, certain places are relatively shorter than the other 3 lines. So perhaps that Keats must have used it for an effect. Okay, so let's get to the poem. I'll just read out the first few stanzas of the poem and then we shall move on. O la belle dame sans mercy, oh, what can ail thee, night at arms, alone and pale loitering? The sedge has withered from the lake, and no birds sing. Oh, what can ail thee, night at arms, so haggard and so woe begone? The squirrel's granary is full, and the harvest done. I see a lily on thy brow, with anguish moist and fever dew, and on thy cheeks a fading rose, fast withered too. I met a lady in the meads, full beautiful, a fairy's child. Her hair was long, her foot was light, and her eyes were wild. I made a garland for her head, and bracelets too, and fragrant song. She looked at me, and she did love. She looked at me as she did love, and made sweet moan. I set her on my pacing steed, and nothing else saw all day long. For sidelong would she bend and sing a fairy song. She found me roots of relish sweet, and honey wild, and manna dew. And sure in language strange she said, I love thee true. She took me to her elfin grot, and there she wept and sighed full sore. And there I shut her wild, wild eyes with kisses four. And there she lulled me asleep, and there I dreamed, ah, woe betide, the latest dream I ever dreamt on the cool hillside. I saw pale kings and princes too, pale warriors, death pale were they all. They cried, La belle dame sans mercy, thee hath in thrall. I saw their starved lips in the gloom, with horrid warning gaped wide, and I awoke and found me here on the cold hillside. And this is why I sojourn here, alone and palely loitering, though the sedges withered from the lake and no birds sing. So the first three stanzas of the poem introduces you to a knight. And he's pale and he's wandering aimlessly. This story that Keats creates in a medieval romance, which is of knights, kings, princes, mythical and mystical enchantress, and magic. They're all tied into one in this poem. And it can perhaps best be summed up as being thematically concerned with the destructive power of love. The poem uses two separate narrative voices. You'll find two narrations, or two speakers here. The first one is of an unknown speaker who has discovered a knight wandering aimlessly in the autumnal landscape. It's getting close to autumn. You'll find autumn season at its best mostly. You saw autumn season at its best in Keats's poem, Ode to Autumn. You will also find it here. Keats very much appreciated, or very much had a lot to do with a strong inclination towards autumn and winter. Now, so he is wandering aimlessly here in this barren landscape. It is early winter or the autumn season, and this unknown speaker who has discovered a knight there questions the knight and questions him of his condition. This happens in the first three stanzas of the poem. The second voice that we hear is that of the knight's reply, and this takes up as a remainder of the rest of the poem, as he narrates how he came to be near this death state. Now, the first three stanzas. So in the first section of the poem, we have a knight and he is ready for battle. He's a knight at arms, and yet, curiously, when he is discovered, he appears to be close to death. He is ailed and haggard, and he is woe begone. In the third stanza of the poem, Keats uses few metaphors to further illustrate the knight's condition. He is described as having a lily on his brow. And lilies they are. Lilies they are usually found to be white, which links to that pale and ghostly sense of the knight's condition. We also have another flower metaphor being used in the poem, and that is the fading rose. Okay, so I see a lily on thy brow. That's one metaphor. And look at the third line of that stanza. And on thy cheeks a fading rose. So you have two flower metaphors there. You have the metaphor of lily, and you have the metaphor of a fading rose. Okay, so roses are traditionally red, and again we have that sense of this rose is a fading rose. That means it is losing its color. So you find that you have a sense of blood draining from the face of the knight. Now this sense of life leaving the knight, that is, life is leaving the knight. He's losing life. He's in a death state. That is mirrored in the landscape. Okay, this landscape is barren. It's the early winter, and Keats very cleverly uses this. It's a clever structural device that we can say that's a clever structural device that Keats uses, and we see that in the first three stanzas. The sedge has withered from the lake. The birds have flown south, and the squirrel is preparing for winter. And all these images and metaphors combine to give us a sense that life is not only being drained away from the knight, but it is also being drained out of nature as well. Winter means death of nature also, right? Everything is going to be covered with, or it's going to be covered under the snow. The birds will fly south. The lake is going to be frozen, and the squirrel and the migratory animals are going to sleep. They're going to hibernate. Sorry, not the migratory animals. They're going to hibernate. Right? They're going to sleep for a long time, and they're going to fill their granary to the full, because nothing is going to be made available. Nature is almost dead during the winter time. So you find that it's a clever structural device that Keats has used, bringing the landscape, or mirroring the landscape and the night, to show that life is draining from the night. Okay, that the night is in a death-like condition. Very beautifully he has used it, or he has brought those images together. The question which the speaker asks twice in this part of the poem is, "Oh, what can ail thee?" In other words, what is wrong with you? And it is this answer, or it is the answer to this question, which makes up the rest of the poem. The first thing that Knight tells us is that he met a lady. He describes her as being very beautiful, but there are also early clues in the poem. There are clues in the poem that there is something not right about this lady. So the first part of the poem, you will find a narrator discovering a wandering knight who's wandering aimlessly, who's loitering, who's wandering aimlessly. He's in a terrible condition, he's in a pale condition, he's in a death-like condition. Okay, and then the second voice after that, you will find the next voice as a reply to this unknown narrator's question. The knight who's wandering aimlessly, who's pale, who's in a death-like state, tells this unknown narrator, that he met a lady and he describes her beauty. And from the beginning itself, from the way he describes itself, we understand that there's something not right about this lady. Something unearthly about her. And she's described as a fairy's child. And she has wild eyes. Her foot is light. അല്ലേ നമ്മുടെ culture-ലായാലും we speak about very beautiful ladies, yakshi, അല്ലേ they are very, very beautiful, unexceptionally beautiful എന്ന് പറയാം. But there is something wild in their eyes, something wild in their looks. They are pale, they are unearthly beautiful. At the same time, a kind of fear is created, but again, a fear combined with a sort of attraction, right? You find that long hair, her foot is light. Okay, നമ്മുടെ ഇതിനകത്തും പറയുന്നുണ്ട് foot being light could be taken any ways. Even the fairies, they fly, right? They don't touch their feet does not touch the ground. They fly. They are light, airy creatures. Okay, so here when the knight goes on to explain her beauty, you understand that there's something unearthly about her. Then you will find that the knight goes on to explain how he made a garland for her head, that is, a garland on her that she could keep on her head, somewhat similar to that tiara that you use, yeah, okay, and also bracelet. Now both of these, that is this garland as well as the bracelet, what is the shape of this garland and the bracelet? The shape of the garland and the bracelet they are both circular objects, right? And it has a similar form of a wedding ring. Okay, so I want you to pay attention here. This is a deep analysis. So look at the garland and the bracelet, they're both circular objects, and it has the same form as a wedding ring. And some people, some critics, some scholars interpret this part of the narrative as some sort of control or power that the knight wants to exercise over this lady, as if he owns her as his own possession. And this can be supported by glancing at the first word of the first three stanzas of the knight, that is, the first three stanzas of the poem. Now, if you look at the poem, so you look at the first three, not just the first three stanzas, I mean the first few stanzas, I see, you will find and then I met a lady in the Metz, I made a garland, I set her on my steed. So I met a lady, I made a garland, I set her on my pacing steed. So you find that I repeated in these stanzas. Now that's because it's all about him. It's all about what he did. So one of these actions is to place a girl on his horse, or it is here we see the first enchantment in place. He recalls how she sang a fairy song and he saw nothing else all day, as if he were under some sort of a spell or an enchantment. So earlier you find that the knight is in a kind of, he wants to, some sort of control. He wants to exercise some sort of control or power over this lady. And that's there in the first few stanzas. And soon you will find that the reverse takes place. You will find that once this one of the action is done, that is placing this girl on his horse, you will see the first enchantment taking place. She slowly sings a fairy song and he sees nothing else. He's under a sort of spell. So although the first three stanzas or the first three stanzas are relatively short, we can learn a remarkable amount about the knight, the speaker also. And the poems conflict through the language and detail. First we know that the knight is traveling alone, and based on his physical state, he's been on the road for quite some time. Okay, looking at him, loitering around. This knight has been on alone and palely loitering. So haggard, so woebegone, with anguish moist and fever dew. Okay, the sedge has withered from the lake and no birds sing. So from this language, you can gauge that this man has been on the road for quite some time. Okay, and he's traveling alone. Next, we know that it is the end of autumn. That's what I told you. Early winter, because harvest time has ended and the grass has begun to wither and die. Finally, you find the symbolic juxtaposition of the lily and the rose, which foregrounds a tension between purity and eroticism, the red color. Okay, so in the beginning he says, I see a lily on thy brow, and on thy cheeks a fading rose, a fading rose. So here you find as a base meaning, it is like the physical state of this knight is mentioned, where he looks pale, he is in a death-like state, there is no life in him. That is why lily on thy brow, death-like state. And then you have the fading rose, which implies that the blood is draining from his cheeks. He is again in a death-like state. But as you dwell a little deeper to understand what this hidden meaning is all about, you find that there's a tension between purity and eroticism. Eroticism, sexual pleasure. Okay? So, thus, the troubles that the knight encountered on the road were likely erotic in nature. Okay? So, whatever these problems that he has been facing, or he has come to, the consequences could be that because of his erotic nature. So from the repetition of, "Oh, what can ail thee, knight at arms," we can deduce that the danger lurks in the woods, and that the knight isn't exactly in the best shape to face any more impending challenges. He's terribly tired. He's almost in a death-like situation. Something has happened to him. By the opening lines, by opening the poem with a question, the speaker begins a conversation that will last throughout the duration of the poem. And the majority of the poem is the knight's answer. What will the knight tell him when he begins to speak? Now, the next 3 stanzas of the poem describes how the knight was given heavenly food, roots of relish sweet, wild honey and manna dew, food from heaven. He is then spoken to in a strange language, and eventually he is lulled to sleep. Now, if you're looking closely, or if you look closely, you will find that the power has shifted greatly from the poem. Look, we have got she. We have from the initial stanzas from the first one. That is, earlier it was the knight saying, I met a lady, I made a garland, I set her on a pacing steed. So here it was the control and the power was in his hands. But now you will find in the next few stanzas, see, she found me roots of relish sweet. She took me to her elfin grot, and there she lulled me asleep. Now you will find that the power slowly shifts, or it has greatly shifted. And it is all in her hands now. This is all a record of a knight who is now passive, who is a passive recipient of the girl's actions. She speaks, she weeps, she sighs, but we are led to believe that they are all part of the enchantment which will ultimately destroy the knight. So the power is in her hands now. He is enchanted. He is cast under the spell. He has been trapped. He's completely trapped in the spell of this love, in this passion for this woman. It is after that the knight is lulled to sleep and he experiences this dream or nightmare. And of course, it has a very deep meaning. I saw pale kings and princes too, pale warriors, death pale were they all. They cried, La belle dame sans mercy, thee hath in thrall. So here you find a deeper meaning behind the poem. It is developed. I saw pale kings, it seems. And I saw their starved lips in the gloom, with horrid warning gaped wide, and I awoke and found me here on the cold hillside. And here we learn that the knight is far from being the first person to suffer this fate. There were others before him. He seems these men of power in this nightmare, the kings, the princes, the warriors, all of them have fallen under the same mysterious spell. And they call out to him in a pitiful warning, but it's already too late. He has been enchanted. He's now finished. The nightmare reaches its peak as the night almost becomes enveloped. Horrid warning gaped wide. The gaping mouth and the pale lips of other victims who call out to him, and suddenly he is awake and the lady is gone. The knight is as wasted and close to death as those who he dreamt about, just like the ones in his dreams, just like the nightmare. those pale, dead warriors and knights and princes who fell into the hands of this woman. They were calling out, they were pitifully warning him, but it was too late. And now he is in the same condition as they were. The gaping mouth and pale lips. Okay? Now, if you look at the poem, this poem also has a cyclic structure, which means that it sort of ends where it begins. In the beginning, we found the knight alone, pale and wandering aimlessly in the barren landscape. And when the poem ends, we find the same. And this is why I sojourn here, alone and palely loitering, though the sedge is withered from the lake and no birds sing. Same thing, that has a cyclic end. So it starts, it ends where it began. Oh, what can ail thee, knight at arms, alone and palely loitering? The sedge has withered from the lake and no birds sing. It's the unknown narrator asking this knight, and the poem ends with the knight giving the answer and the reasons to why he was loitering or why he is sojourning here. Even though the sedge has withered from the lake and no birds sing, these are the reasons that he is in this pitiful condition. So that's the poem. This climax, I just want to tell you a little more about the poem. In the poem, this knight who's pale and wandering aimlessly, the night, what happens? He comes across a woman who casts him in her spell, and his experiences with her caused the poor state. Caused this condition, this poor deathly state that he's suffering. He compares her to a fairy's child, and suggesting supernatural charm. Her eyes, wild, indicate her sexual appeal or desire. The garlands and bracelets that he makes for the woman indicates his own desire. So he wants to make her his own, say you have that wedding ring kind of thing, to overpower her. A ring is also, it just doesn't mean marriage alone, it has a lot of indication of overpowering a woman. Though the woman looks and moans and let us know that their brief relationship has ended, and this was very much erotic, sexual pleasure alone, lust. It's not true love, it is just lust. So in the first half of the poem, the knight's story creates a complex picture of the woman, and she has the supernatural ability to seduce the men who cross her path, and she brings fatality to all those men who come before her. Her sexual desire. Now the fairy-like characteristics of and the images of the knights, the kings, the princes, gives us a medieval poetic tradition. Keats draws upon these references and modernizes them to bring out the theme of sexual liberation and courtly tradition. The climax of the poem occurs during the knight's terrifying nightmares in stanza 10. We learn and understand that all the men ensnared by the lady are of regal stature. They're kings. They're, warriors, princes, not princess, princes, the prince. This detail is crucial because it alerts us to the tensions between the woman's sexual liberation. Now, this is what I want to tell you about. Analysis, a critical analysis would be about the woman's sexual liberation and the chivalrous courtly tradition of the kings, princes, and warriors she seduces. Now, a knight is always bound by a code of honor. He pledges before the court that his actions will always be just. So these men, these knights, these warriors, even kings, would probably have to think twice before sleeping with a woman they met in the woods, a strange woman. Right? Especially when they're bound by a code of honor, they have to keep to it. However, their exhaustion, their loneliness, and perhaps their desire, combined with the woman's beauty or the woman's charm, and may have, created a spontaneous and or an immediate erotic satisfaction. They would have wanted to go for an erotic satisfaction. At first, the joy and pleasure these men experience testify how they let their desire for sexual appetite get better of them. That first three stanzas, they overpower the woman, they want to overpower her. They make garlands for her, they make a bracelet for her, they take her and want her to be there, some sort of possession over her. Each one of them had done this. So not just the knight, but the ones who came earlier also. So it was a trap that they did not know. And it was like overpowering. They tried, they felt that they would overpower the woman. But it happens the other way around. But soon we know from the dream of the night that falling for the lady had proved disastrous for each one of them. All who fell for her woke up cold, alone, dead, wandering forever in the woods, searching for love that will never be found again. They are in a death-like state. It could be death, it could be guilt, it could be anything. The association of sex with the woman's fairy-like bewitching charms suggests the danger of erotic desires and uncertainty of these affairs. Especially a message for the young, for the youth. True love does not need a sexual appetite. It is when true love and its consummation happen, that is what we call love. Otherwise, when there is no love and just mere sexual desire, that's called lust. There's a difference. So the poem can be taken as a suggestion for the danger of erotic desires and uncertainty of these short affairs. All right, so now let me leave you with a question. We had two narrators, right? An unknown speaker who discovers a knight and the knight wandering aimlessly. Okay, my question is, when the knight ends his story, the last stanza, the story ends, right? The speaker from the first stanza, that is the unknown speaker, what if he meets this woman in the meadows? He's also traveling in that same path, right? What if he meets that woman in the meadows? What choice will he make? Or what choice will he make when they eventually cross paths? Will the charm of this lady bewitch him, and will he suffer the same fate as the knight has? Or will he be straightforward and follow his honor and make it through the woods alive? That's my question. Think about it, write about it, and give it to me as an assignment. Okay, so with that we have covered the poem La Belle Dame Sans Merci. We shall do the discussions, the question answers section and all that in the class. Okay, so till then, thank you and keep safe.